Next topic is courage and cowardice, and what Seabass tells us to write about is to write about the flow trip and how those two opposite qualities being challenged during the flow trips. So, what they write as an introduction. Courage and cowardice seem like absolutes. We are often quick to label other people or ourselves either brave or timid, courageous or cowardly. However, one bright afternoon on a river deep in wilds of the Ozark Mountains, I learned that these qualities are as changeable as mercury. So, I actually been lucky to be on a real flow trip, and I can write something about flow trips. For example, how do I start my essay? Courage and cowardice are always described as opposites. The majority of the population has tendency to divide everyone into two separate groups, risk takers or impulsive thinkers. Most prefer to think about themselves as brave-hearted or timid, fearless or cowardly. However, life events can change our attitudes or ourselves. From my personal experience, my courage was challenged in the wild of the mountains. I learned both risk-taking strategy and flexibility as well. So, what's the best wants us to write? During a cross-country drive, my friend Nina and I decided to stop at the campsite in Missouri and spend the afternoon on a flow trip down Big Piney River, 14 miles through the wilderness. We rented a canoe and paddled happily off. During my school years, I was on the trip to Ural Mountains, which included, according to the plan, the flow trip down the mountain river, 100 miles into the Siberian wilderness. Myself and the group of the tourists, which included my family, had to rent a canoe and started to paddle happily. So, I would write happily so. Things went fine. For the first 7 or 8 miles, we gazed at the overhanging bluffs, commented on the wonderful variety of trees. It was spring and the dogwood was in bloom, and marveled at the clarity of the water. Then, in approaching a bend in the river, which we later learned was called Devil's Elbow, the current suddenly swept us in toward the bank underneath the low-hanging branches of the weeping willow. The canoe tipped over, and I was pulled under. My foot caught for just a few seconds on the submerged roots of the willow. Just as I surfaced, taking my first frantic gulp of air, I saw the canoe sweeping out, upright again but empty, and Nina frantically swimming after it. I knew I should help out. I was petrified and hung my head in shame as I let my friend brave the treacherous rapids and hauled the canoe back into the gravel bar while I stood by cravenly. So basically, it happens really often that you fell out of the canoe, and actually, indeed, I can swim really well, and I was being pushed out of the canoe. So what I write is that for the first 7 or 8 days, things went fine. We watched the mountains and the pine trees until the river below started to form rapids and the current swept my canoe towards the bank, and I was pushed out of the canoe with the paddle underneath of the bank whipping willow. I was pulled under the canoe and I could reach the roots of the willow with my hand. I saw the canoe with my parents sweeping towards me, and I was swimming after it. I knew that I could swim, but I was startled, and for a moment I was scared and felt the wilderness near me. I was glad to be out of deadly rapids. So what happened next, according to Seabass writer? Then came the scream. Startled, I glanced up to see Nina, both hands over her eyes, dash off the gravel bar and bank into the water. I gazed down into the canoe to see, caught in the bottom of it, the unmistakable black and brown checkerboard patterned form of a copperhead snake. It was evidently been sunning itself peacefully on the weeping willow branch when we passed by underneath. I don't know exactly why, but the supposedly inborn terror of snakes is something that has passed me by completely. I actually find them rather charming in a scary sort of way. Nina was still screaming, "Kill it!" but it was calm in a way that must have seemed to mock her, and gently I paddled it with the oar until it reared up, slithered over the side of the canoe, and raced away, terrified itself, into the underbrush. So, I meet snakes really often. So during my trip in Siberia, we met a moose, but I write about a bear, which is much scarier than the moose. But the moose also can attack. So basically, I described something like meeting a large animal in the wilderness. So next day we had another surprise. At the stop of the river bank, we met a bear. First we heard the sound of the wild animal and sound of the broken trees. We jumped as maybe broken bushes. Trees is too much. Bushes. We jumped as we seated at the fire because we knew about bears in the area, but it didn't seem that the bear wanted to meet us. We noticed that bear's back first. We noticed the bear's back first, looking away from the fire as it would be searching for something in the grass. Before it was going to walk away, it raised on the lower feet, turning towards us, then stood back on the feet and disappeared in the dark. We knew about bears in the area, but we didn't know if the bear was looking for us. Neither we knew about bear behavior. Our reaction was to hide in the tent before bear walked away by itself. Later that night, in our cozy, safe motel room, we agreed that we each had cold chills thinking about what might have happened. Still, I learned something important from the ordeal. I know that had we encountered only the rabbits, I might have come away ashamed, labeling myself a coward. And had we encountered only the snake, Nina might have done the same. And I also know that neither of us will ever again be quite so apt to brand another person as lacking courage, because we will always know that just around the corner, maybe the snake or the bend in the river or the figure in the shadows or something else, as yet unanticipated, will cause our blood to freeze. And I finished my essay also that later during the trip, after the animal was gone, I knew that if we would encounter only the rapids, we could feel ashamed. If we would meet a bear, we again could feel the same. After this trip, I know that regardless, I knew, or I realized, that regardless how brave you are, there are always situations in life to make yourself looking forward or make your blood to freeze.